All right, guys, welcome back to the Establish the Pass podcast presented by Clutch Points. I'm your host, Blake Lovell. With me, as always, my co-host, Dillon Reagan, back here to make our picks for Week 12 in the NFL. Doing this a day early because it is Thanksgiving, and there will be several games taking place on Thursday. But, Dillon, that will not stop our picks, and we're going to do a first here with our picks this week. There's going to be a first in the history of our picks that I'm going to kind of tease, and not going to be teasing long because we're going to jump right into it right off the bat, but interesting slate this week with some games that look pretty one-sided, but you've also got a good slate of games here, I think, that are about that 5-point or less type spread, which means a lot of things could swing one way or the other.
Yeah, maybe a few surprisingly low spreads just because when you look at the records the teams have, but then you remember the quality of the football that a lot of these teams have played. It hasn't, for the most part, been insanely high. So that's why you'll see some things with Tampa Bay, the Vikings, some teams that have really good records, the Seahawks, that are pretty small favorites. But at the same time, I think for the most part, you and I almost went all favorites this week. It still felt like an obvious one for a lot of these games. And then that kind of, again, to the game you're alluding to, kind of falls into that same bucket, a game that we're really excited for, but at the same time, you feel that like it's going to be a decent win for Dallas there on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I mean, we start with our games of the week as always. We'll get into we're about to get into our betting lock too, one of them, and our upsets. But like games of the week, we have two here, and we're going to start with the Giants and the Cowboys. The Cowboys are 9-point favorites in Arlington. I think this is rightful to have it as a game of the week because the Giants, we know, good record, coming off a disappointing loss to the Lions. Cowboys just wallop the Vikings. Just one of the most one-sided games we've seen this season. And now I think they come back home. They play a Giants team. Divisional matchup, always tricky to kind of project how those play out. But I just think the Cowboys are at least 9 points better than the Giants right now with the way they're playing. And I see the Cowboys winning by double digits. So what I did, Dillon, for the first time ever, not only is we have a game of the week here, but I'm going to make it my betting lock of the week as I'm going to go with the Cowboys to win this thing by at least 9. Because I look at the other games on the slate here, and I'm not loving many of the others. And I just look at this one, and I don't know that I expect the Cowboys to do what they did against the Vikings again. But, hey, I'm not saying they couldn't if they play pretty well, especially I think what the defense could do here against Daniel Jones and this Giants offense.
Yeah, we just saw what the Lions defense that hasn't been all that good all year did against this Daniel Jones and the Giants. So, I know the one they played earlier in the year was a pretty close game. Dallas ended up winning by a touchdown. Giants stuck with it. I think both teams are different, not necessarily for the worse in any way for the Giants. Obviously, they've won a lot of games. Yes, they just had that bad performance, but you look at all the different good games they've had over the course of the year. The thing is their defense still isn't that great. Dallas is just point blank one of the best teams in the league, and I think their offense, you saw it start to come together in that one. Obviously, the defense set them up quite a few times, but still, Dak looked really good. The pass they had the run. They had blended a really balanced attack in that one. They're running the ball fantastically. No matter how much Zeke's in there, Pollard's looked fantastic as we talked about. We wanted to see them use him more, and sure enough, it's working out well. And just overall for the Giants, yes, they run the ball a lot, and if Dallas is going to have one thing on defense that they maybe aren't perfect at, is their run defense because of how good their pass defense is. But overall, yeah, I think the Cowboys will cover, even though it's not my lock of the week. I would pick them to win this game by at least 9 points. But I still think it qualifies, like we mentioned, for this game of the week because it's Thanksgiving, because these teams are so close in the standings with really good records. I think they're probably still both going to make the playoffs unless the Commanders kind of sneak up on one of the NFC teams that's not in the division lead. But outside of that, I mean, there's really a separation in the NFC standings. So the Giants are still looking good. I just don't think on Thanksgiving they're going to be able to go in there into Dallas and find a way to win, and probably won't lose by under 9 points.
I tend to think this next game will be the game of the week, and that's the Bengals, 1.5-point favorites on the road against the Titans in Nashville. And obviously, we remember what happened the last time these two teams played in the playoffs last season. It was the Bengals with a surprising win, go on to the Super Bowl. Meanwhile, the Titans, have, you look at kind of the way they play, getting Ryan Tannehill back. That's obviously been nice to have for the Titans. And, coming off a really, I thought, a good win in Green Bay against the Packers, and, had some, Traylon Burks is back. That's huge, I think, clearly for the offense, and which is still going to be all about Derrick Henry. But I say all that. I think I'm going to pick the Bengals here because it looks like they're getting Jamar Chase back, and I think that just something about this Bengals team. I know they've at times, we've kind of talked about them this season, but I still think with their offense and what they can do, obviously Joe Mixon and whether he plays, that's something to watch for. But I think this will be a really good game, and I just think the Bengals are just a little bit better maybe than the Titans in this one.
Yeah, I'm siding with the Bengals too, but obviously really close. I think they have a better team than they did, honestly, at this point last season or even into the playoffs. I think their whole offense is really balanced right now. They're running the ball really well, something that DVOA-wise last year was a struggle at times. Their defense has obviously come around. The Titans are right there, though. Obviously, they've played, from that 0-2 start, they've won 7 of their last 8 games. They find ways constantly to win. Looked really good in Green Bay for large portions of that game, and the defense has been great. And I do, still have concerns about what could happen to Burrow, given what we just saw in that playoff game. And obviously, the game being in Tennessee, it's going to have a little bit of an interesting feel, a lot of revenge on the mind for the Titans. Yeah, definitely a playoff preview kind of atmosphere going to go into this one. But like you said, there's something about what Cincinnati's doing, even without Jamar Chase. Burrow's look fantastic. I think that they're going to have a little better protection in this one for him, and I think it's just the defense for Cincinnati is such a key to what they're doing. I know they didn't have their best game against Pittsburgh. I thought Kenny Pickett looked actually pretty good in that last one, but yeah, I'll go with the Bengals barely just because I trust the quarterback a bit more. But man, I will not be surprised if we're sitting here on when we record on Monday and the Titans have come in, sacked Burrow again like 8 times, and this time they don't get all those turnovers and all the fumble luck and different things that the Bengals needed to win that playoff game, and maybe Tennessee does come away with the win. But like you said, this will probably be the actual game of the week. We've been pretty good with game of the week picks. I know we had Cowboys-Vikings.
Cowboys-Vikings.
I don't think we're going to get that one here, but maybe we'll in Dallas. But yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I anticipate this one coming down to the wire one way or the other.
All right, to our betting locks, as I said, I'm going to go with the Cowboys to cover that 9-point spread against the Giants. Meanwhile, I think you may actually have the best one here, Dylan. That's going to be the Saints at the 49ers. The Niners, 9-point favorites as well. In San Francisco there in terms of I think this is one, look, we saw the Niners. They look really good against the Cardinals. Saints just still feel like a team that you just don't know what to expect on a week-in and week-out basis. I think that's the best way to put it. They did beat the Rams, but as we'll see in a minute, probably not saying a whole lot in terms of where the Rams stand right now. But I think the Niners, as you saw like on the broadcast, the thing they just kept bringing up is just, it's like if you ask Kyle Shanahan, what's your best weapon on offense? He's kind of like, I don't know. Like, take your pick. Like, they just have so many options, and I just think with their offense, their defense, I think this is a good pick here for the Niners.
And the fact they're at home, I know New Orleans hasn't had the same home field advantage this past years, but nonetheless, a little different game than if they were playing in New Orleans. I think the Niners, as we've kind of, even when they weren't winning a lot of games early in the year, we felt like they had something in them to, over the course of the year, they'd figure it out. Sure enough, they have. Obviously, adding Christian McCaffrey helps, but getting healthier on offense, the offensive line has really started to come together. The interior of the offensive line hasn't been as much of an issue as it was earlier in the year, and it helps when you have, Ayuk and Samuel and McCaffrey and these guys making so many different plays. Ayuk just keeps becoming a more complete player every week. I think Jimmy G's looked fantastic, really, so far, the last couple of weeks especially. He's making some throws and making some decisions that we just at times haven't always made him see or seen him do. So I think they're just a vastly superior football team to what New Orleans is. I know they just won against a Rams team with all those injuries and all those different things. They still gave up 20 points to, an offense that at times had Bryson Perkins in there. I think that just the 9-point spread, it's not, don't love, it's a little high, but at the same time, I think that they're at least a 10-point better team than New Orleans, and I think there's a chance that they just keep rolling like we saw last week. I think that they're just going to, at 6-4, they still got work to do if they want to win that division. They have the tiebreak at the moment after beating Seattle, but I think they're just going to come into this one. The atmosphere is going to be great after what they just did in Mexico City. I think the Niners are going to probably pull away from this one, and that's why I ultimately picked it as the lock.
All right, to our upsets, for the first time this season, Dylan, I'm gonna pick this team to win a game. I truly don't think I picked this team to win a game the entire season. I may be wrong on that, but I'm fairly certain. The Broncos are 2.5-point favorites on the road in Carolina to play the Panthers. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to pick the Panthers, I think. And again, I don't think I've done that this season yet. The Broncos lose in overtime to the Raiders. They're still the Broncos. They still cannot score consistently. And I think this team is done. I have no optimism whatsoever for the Broncos at this point. And even on the road against a Panthers team that I likewise don't have a lot of optimism in, I just think the Panthers are going to win the game. So I'm going to take a chance and go with them in this one.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that that's exactly what happens. I'm sticking to, two things. We need a few picks to be different this week, so that's part of why I picked Denver. But also my philosophy of if there's one really good unit in the game, a lot of times I'll pick that team. And in this case, it's the Broncos defense. I know I went against that last week with their game against the Raiders, but at the same time, I just think that they're fifth in DVOA. I still think they put together a really good season. I know they had the breakdown on that last play in the overtime loss to the Raiders, but still, for the most part, as whenever Vegas got inside the 20, they held them down to field goals. Special teams have been an issue for Denver at times. Carolina much better there, but Carolina's offense is still really bad, and I just wonder if Denver's going to maybe force a few turnovers. Maybe that's the difference that they need. Either way, I think this game's going to be really low scoring. Just checking the over under 36 points. Goodness, that feels a little high. Maybe I'm just kidding.
Yes,
but it is. Honestly, I will see. I wouldn't be shocked if we get a 13-3 kind of, the same kind of thing that we just saw for that Ravens game against the Panthers. And I think obviously the Ravens defense, as much as they've improved and are still a pretty solid unit overall, I'd say that Denver has outplayed them for the most part this year on that side, and that's not good news for Carolina. So maybe they'll, I'll pick the Broncos here, but at the same time, Denver's offense. I could see them turning the ball over, and for the most part, they've been bad, but consistently bad. I saw a stat that 20 teams have had worse offensive games than Denver, but Denver is consistently in that 24 percentile. They're just always bad, just not so bad. So maybe this is the so bad game, and maybe that's the one where you get the win with Carolina. But we're talking about teams with a combined 6-15 record. Maybe we should move on to the next game.
All right, we're moving on to the next game. Not record-wise, not too great with this one either. The Steelers are at the Colts. The Colts, 2.5-point favorites in Indy. I mean, the Colts, lost a tough game to the Eagles, but I don't know. I still think they found a way to win this game. I'm just not real high on the Steelers either. Two teams, again, it's kind of the same formula here. It's a little bit better, but two teams that I don't think you really know what you're getting week in and week out, but I'll take the home team in the Colts.
Yeah, I'm picking the Steelers in my upset. I as I mentioned, kind of talking about the Bengals game, I really thought Kenny Pickett looked fantastic. He had the one drop by Pickens on a long play down the field. Other plays where Pickens and the receivers were bailing him out a little more. But nonetheless, I thought you started seeing some of the things click for him, and some of the decision-making was not so questionable as it has been at times over the course of the early part of his career. Indianapolis still, though, I mean, part of this is trusting that the Pittsburgh defense is getting better. They're really good on the ground. I know Indianapolis just put up probably their best defensive performance of this season. I know they beat the Chiefs, obviously. They benefit from kicks in that game and some of the special team issues with Harrison Butker out. But holding Philadelphia to 17 points, not an easy task. They still, despite that, it's the other side of the ball I'm concerned about. They're last in DVOA offense. They're last in running the ball, second to last in passing. And I think Pittsburgh's defense, I know they just got shredded by Joe Burrow. A lot of teams got shredded by Joe Burrow. I think with Watt being back in there, just the time as he gets a couple more games under his belt and he gets those reps in, I think they're only going to improve on that side. So I'll pick Pittsburgh to get the upset win in a game, another one similar, like you said, in terms of two teams that have a lot to be desired at this point. And two defenses that have been pretty solid, and I think Indianapolis' defense, if they're going to win this game, they've been dominant with their run defense. Really, they've struggled a bit more against the pass. So if they can slow down Kenny Pickett, I could see, to your point, the Colts winning this game. But I'll go with the Steelers finding a way to get another win in as Mike Tomlin tries desperately to hold on to not having a under 500 season on his career docket.
Yep, that could be a big step, beating the Colts for sure. All right, to our quick picks. We will roll through these quickly as always. The Bills on Thanksgiving, 9.5-point favorites on the road in Detroit to play the Lions. Lions got a little bit of momentum out of that game against the Giants, but I think there's a different task here. I think the Bills are a little bit more of a challenge, and I think they will probably pick apart this Lions defense a little bit and pick up the win.
Yeah, I'm picking the Bills too. They struggled in the first half for a little bit against the Browns, and they still end up, obviously the Cleveland ends up getting I believe the cover with some of the points they scored late in the game. But nonetheless, for a while, Buffalo had a blowout on their hands, and given how they hadn't played that great in the first half, that's a testament to just how good of a football team this is. They're still one of the most complete teams. They're still top of the league in DVOA, and yeah, for all the good things that Detroit's done, their defense, another, they had, as we mentioned, a really good performance against the Giants. They're probably at 4-6, probably more of a 5-5 kind of 500 football team. They've won 3 in a row. They've got all these good feelings. They're going to, it's Thanksgiving, but man, it's just a different task going against Buffalo. And we saw last year when Buffalo, I believe they played the night game on Thanksgiving, just completely dominated the Saints, and I don't think they're going to be. After especially playing in the stadium on Sunday, I think they're going to be more than ready for another prime time, even if it's in the early slot on Thanksgiving performance here. I think Josh Allen, like you said, against this Detroit defense, it shouldn't be as much of a challenge. Maybe Detroit can build on what they did last time and cover here. That's why I stayed away from the spread, but still think the Bills are just a vastly superior team, so they'll pick here.
All right, the Patriots of the Vikings, also a Thanksgiving game. The spread's a little lower than I thought it would be. The Vikings are only 2.5-point favorites in this game. If you link that to the Patriots' defense here, maybe being able to do some things, not exactly the same as the Cowboys, but somewhat similar perhaps. But I still think the Vikings are the better team. Always have questions at times about the Patriots' offense, and so, I'm going to pick the Vikings to bounce back at home here.
Yeah, I'm picking the Vikings too, but I'm a little nervous. I mean, the spread is, like you said, it's low. Minnesota, though, obviously a lot of jokes being made about them being 8-2 with a negative point differential. As we talked about, they'd won all these one-score games. They are 24th in total DVOA. They're below New Orleans, which is insane. I think over the course of the year that should normalize a bit more. But meanwhile, New England, the offense is bad. Let's be clear there. The Jets defense had a great game, and they've been really solid on that side of the ball. But man, New England just couldn't take advantage of anything. They've really stagnated. I know at times they've been able to run the ball well, but they're still that side's not the concern. They've moved up to number 1 in defensive DVOA, and I just worry what we just saw against Dallas that we could see something similar. Maybe not to that extent, but nonetheless, still struggle in this one. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game than some of the Vikings games we've seen this year. I'm picking Minnesota, but you know what? I'm going to flip it. Might as well have 3 different picks. I'm going to pick the Patriots with the upset. Don't believe in their offense, but I do believe in their defense, and just classic Belichick having a team that we get into November and they start hitting their stride. They still have a lot of shortcomings, still a lot of issues, but I don't know. Maybe I don't want to be. I'm not trying to hate on the Vikings. I still think they're a much better team than some of the advanced stats and their point differential would indicate. But just something about this Patriots defense and coming on the short week, I'll go with the Pats in an upset. So I'll keep the other upset, but this is my second upset special, I guess.
There you go. This next one, the Bucs at the Browns. The Bucs are 3.5-point favorites in Cleveland. I think, Dylan, we're assuming Deshaun Watson's going to start this game, right? Is that the expectation?
I think he's supposed to be back after their 11th game. So I believe.
Okay, never mind.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, his first game was always supposed to be the Houston game. That's right,
the Houston game. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, next week.
You're right. Okay, next week. Never mind. Forget everything I said. Pick the Bucs to win the game. That's what I'm doing here. It all runs together sometimes when we get to this point in the season, but that's right. The Houston game is going to be his return. Either way, I like the Bucs here. I think that we'll see what the Bucs are made of the rest of the season, but I think they find a way to win this game.
Yeah, I don't know even for the Browns how big of a difference it's going to make with Deshaun back. They're 4th in offensive DVOA. It's insane. Brissett's been solid. They've run the ball well. They've unlike some of these other teams that we've talked about, they've lost a ton of one-score games. Yeah. They obviously fought back just to make that the case against the Bills, but they had, that first quarter, they looked like the better football team. Things changed quickly. One fumbled snap, or I forget, or whatever it was against the Bills, and the whole thing kind of changes. But in this one, yeah, I still don't think I have enough to think that they're going to beat Tampa Bay with how they've started to look. The offense still has a lot to be desired. The defense has come around. It's going to be a good matchup there. Maybe the Browns get something cooking. Maybe they find a way to get an upset here. But I still think that Tampa Bay is starting to figure out enough on offense, throwing the ball. At least running the ball is going to be out of the equation. But that works fine because the Browns defense still overall has been really bad, and they've been especially bad, on both sides with their run defense and pass defense. So I think, yeah, there's just enough here for the positive momentum Tampa has going and the way that they're going to find ways to win games. And I just don't know the Browns have been able to do, obviously, over the course of the year. When they need to stop, they can't get one. When they looks like the offense is cooking, they literally fumble the ball back, even if it's an unforced. It's just those kind of mistakes have followed Cleveland around this year, and it's going to be hard to say that that's going to change in this one.
Probably not a lot to say about this next game. Speaking of the Houston and the Texans are on the road in Miami against the Dolphins. Dolphins 13-point favorites here. In this game, yeah, I just find it hard to believe the Texans will be able to find enough here offensively to keep up with this Dolphins team. So give me the Dolphins. Wasn't want to quite go to that 13-point spread, but I think the Dolphins are the pick.
I feel like maybe I should have. Their ESPN Football Power Index has them as an 85.7% favorite. We just saw what they did with the the rushing attack against Cleveland a couple of weeks ago, where they looked like the 49ers in some of those playoff games with Kyle Shanahan. You would not be mistaken when you see this Jeff Wilson, Mostert, and then Mike McDaniel calling the plays. But I think that the Dolphins are just they're rolling on offense. Obviously, if they can get the running game hasn't always been great this year. Obviously, Cleveland's been awful against it, so that helps. But I think if that starts to work, coinciding with their top-ranked pass offense DVOA, just barely ahead of Kansas City, which is pretty crazy. But it's not surprising if you've watched a lot of the Dolphin games and how they spread the field, how open guys get, how Tua's looked. All of it. It's just so interconnected. Mike McDaniel has. I had high expectations, but he's delivered obviously with that on that side of the ball and the culture and how those players feel. I still think Miami on defense has some concerns. Obviously, their pass defense DVOA is fourth worst in the league. So maybe Houston finds a way to get some points going. I just don't see it. I think the Dolphins will cover this game. I think we've seen Miami at times just put it down on some weaker opponents, and I think this is probably another one of those cases, especially having the game in Miami. Get the Texans in that with that bench area and the sun, as Miami likes to do, and maybe this is another one where they pull away and easily win. Like you said, just a little. If it was like 10 or even 11, maybe I would have done it. But that extra couple points, you shy away from it. But then we might again look at this on Monday and be like, man, that was one of the easier picks that we should have made.
Yeah, could very well be. Like I said, I think the Dolphins could score a lot here, and not sure about the Texans. All right, quarterback questions all across the board here. Bears or the Jets? Jets are 4.5-point favorites. Obviously, Justin Fields' status with the shoulder injury worth monitoring here. That would clearly significantly change probably the outlook for the Bears, especially against this Jets defense. Meanwhile, the Jets, no idea what they're doing at quarterback these days. Sounds like Robert Saleh is not exactly sold on Zach Wilson at this point. And so a lot of questions there. This, to me, Dylan, feels like a defensive-minded game, and I think the Jets take care of business.
Yeah, I think the Jets take care of business just because their defense is so dominant. And the Bears haven't been, fantastic on that side of the ball. They've actually been pretty bad over the course of the year. That's why they have, and it's worked out, I think, to what Bears fans would want, as we talked about last week. Justin Fields looks great, but you're still losing games. Except now that he's injured, not so great. But at the same time, if it's something that even if he missed I know they said day-to-day or could miss the rest of the year, basically the most wide range of
quite a range,
you can imagine.
Yes.
I still think it doesn't sound like it's anything that would hamper him next year. So maybe it would be a good thing if you start, given how great he's looked and you have the positive feelings about that, and you keep losing and you rack up draft picks. Maybe you get one of those picks that's high and a team wants to trade up for a quarterback. And anyway, I'm thinking too far ahead for the Bears maybe at this point, given we're just talking about this game against the Jets. But I don't think it really matters who's at quarterback for the Jets, given how good their defense has been. Maybe it actually should be Flacco or someone else, because at least they can have been a little more competent and kind of keep the thing rolling. We saw that at times last year where Zach Wilson, early in the year until he came back from his injury, looked bad. And Mike White had that crazy game against the Bengals and just taking the layups. And in terms of layups, I mean, it should have been a layup when he got Zach Wilson got the question about the offense letting the defense down. Instead, he completely funked that one up, and now you have Elijah Moore posting pictures on his Instagram of him throwing a football as if he's the quarterback. Defensive players liking tweets questioning Zach Wilson, and then obviously what happened was solid running back on considering him as the full-time starter. So that is a concern. Obviously, I just don't think against this Bears defense it's going to make much of a difference. And on the flip side, especially if Justin Fields isn't in there, and if he's not fully healthy. If he's not fully healthy, what are you doing playing him when you're a 3-7 football team? So I don't see a reason why Fields should be out there. And I think the Jets defense, clearly one of the more dominant defenses at this point in the league. It's crazy given how bad they were last year. They're 6th in DVOA, expected to be 3rd by the end of the year with the projections. So, man, I think that is the unit that's going to tell the story of this game. It might be low scoring, it might be ugly, but I think the Jets find a way to get an important win as they try to, it's rough having those 2 losses to the Pats in terms of playoff tiebreakers, but I think they get a good win here to get another win in the column.
Falcons at the Commanders. Commanders 4-point favorites in this game. Feels like another game the Falcons will keep close. Seems like that's what they do, right? Aside from a couple games this season. Commanders got a lot of confidence right now with Taylor Heineke at quarterback. I just think the Commanders are the better pick at home, but like I said, even for the Falcons, I'm sure they'll find a way to keep this close somehow.
They keep doing that, don't they? I mean, well, obviously they won the game last week,
yes.
And they've been surprising in terms of 5 and 6. If I was a Falcons fan, I'd be pretty happy with how they've performed over the course of the year. But speaking of fans should be happy, definitely Commander fans. Obviously, only a game up on the Falcons in the standings, but I think given where they were early in the year, they've won 5 of their last 6, something like that. The defense has really come around. It's not necessarily as dominant as it was during their division title year in 2020, but you got to be happy with how that side of the ball has picked things up. They defend the run really well, which is something obviously the Falcons at times have relied on. Not that Mariota hasn't looked pretty solid and stretches for Atlanta as well. But I think that part of that matchup there, that might be a tougher part. And obviously Washington's offense is starting to figure some things out. It still hasn't been exactly perfect, but they just do enough. And I think they're probably going to just do enough here. And this just feels like the kind of game the Commanders need to win if they want to get into the playoffs. Maybe this is where Atlanta messes things up for them, and the standings start to pull away a bit in terms of the separation of the teams in the wild card spots from these other teams in the second tier. But I think I'll go with the Commanders to find a way to win this one as well.
Ravens 4-point favorites as well on the road against the Jags in Jacksonville there. I thought about this one for a little bit, but then again, I think I'm the guy I've given the Jags a couple home upset picks this year that I don't think have worked out too well. So I'm not going back to that well here. I'm going to go with the Ravens. I think they're the better team, but I did think about this one a little bit.
Yeah, given the Ravens didn't look that good in their last game, at least on offense against Carolina, I don't know if they're going to have the same problems with Jacksonville's defense. But yeah, to your point, this is the spread's not that big. The Jaguars, according to ESPN's Football Power Index, a 42% chance of winning this. That's pretty high given the standings. We've talked about Jacksonville. Yeah. They're like the anti-Vikings in terms of the way they've played, but where they sit in the DVOA rankings and where they actually are as a team. They've been pretty solid on offense. But I think the Ravens are still, at this point, a vastly superior team. And as we talked about with them earlier, their defense is starting to come along. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why they're 3rd in overall DVOA. It's pretty crazy. They're only behind Buffalo and Dallas. So special teams is always really good for them, too. So, yeah, I think the Ravens are just too complete of a team to not be the pick in this one.
Chargers 4.5-point favorites in Arizona to play the Cardinals, who are coming off of not the greatest performance against the Niners. Then again, the Chargers just probably be happy they're not playing the Chiefs this week, Dylan. That's probably the best thing for the Chargers. I think they bounce back and get the win here. The Cardinals, I just don't think, quite frankly, or whether it's Kyler Murray, Colt McCoy, I just don't have a lot of confidence in the Cardinals right now. So I think the Chargers find a way to win this game.
I think they do too. Justin Herbert had the big drive to take the lead. It's just left too much time for Mahomes, and obviously the Chargers defense still, despite it being Mahomes and the Chiefs, they they got to do a bit better there to try to limit them in that last drive. It's so easy, and it was almost going into it, you just assumed they were going to score. It almost felt like they left too much time for the Chargers. But anyway, yeah, I think the Chargers are just a better football team. We just saw with the Cardinals defense. I know that it's San Francisco and what they're starting to build on that side of the ball, but they've just been pretty bad over there. And I do still have concerns, obviously, about the Chargers on that side. We know the run defense issues, but I don't know if Arizona is necessarily equipped at this moment, the way that they've built their offense, to take advantage of it the same way that the Chiefs did for large portions of that game. I just think the Chargers are a better football team. I think they'll do enough to get a win. But yeah, this is a weird one, though. You know me with the Chargers. These are the kind of games, and when you look back on years where they've had good teams and missed the playoffs, these are the kind of games you look back on and be like, how did they lose to Houston? How did they lose to Arizona? Like,
yeah.
I can totally see it happening, but not going to pick it. I want the Chargers to stay in the mix because it's a lot of fun having Justin Herbert playing games that mean something. So hoping they can stay in the playoff race for a little here. Losing this would be crushing given how solid the AFC is.
Well, the Raiders are not in the playoff race, but they did beat the Broncos. So a little momentum finally for Las Vegas here as they head to Seattle to play the Seahawks. Seahawks 3.5-point favorites in this game. Didn't think about this one as much because I just think the Seahawks are going to pick apart the Raiders defense, unlike the Broncos could not do. I think Geno and company will probably be able to do that, whether it's Geno, Metcalf, Lockett, Walker, you name it. I think the Seahawks will have much more success against this Raiders defense. The question is, can you stop Devontae Adams? Not a lot of people can, but I think the Seahawks just find a way to win this one.
Yeah, I think Seattle's just clearly the better team at this point. They did struggle in that game against Tampa Bay and Germany a couple weeks ago. I think it's just hard to look too much into a game like that when you're playing across for Seattle, not even just across the ocean, but across the world essentially when you consider how far away they are here on the West Coast. But coming back, getting a little home cooking here. I think Seattle just a better football team. The Raiders, we've talked about them in terms of now they've won 3 games. They should have beaten Arizona for sure. Probably should at least be 5-5. They're still have a lot to be desired on defense. It's still been a mess over there for the most part. We joked about how if Denver couldn't take advantage of it, there was no hope for Denver, and sure enough, I'm picking them this week against Carolina. But it was at least there's some fight. I don't think it hasn't been a lack of trying. They've had a lot of 1-score games that they've fallen short in, basically the opposite of the Vikings also. But I think Seattle's just too solid. I know that offense maybe again isn't going to be as solid as it's been in the top 10 of DVOA. It's projected to finish more in the 13 range. Defense is fine, but I think if this game was in Vegas, maybe I'd feel differently. But I don't know. I think Seattle's just. I don't know if they're going to win the division there with how the Niners are looking, and now they are tied up in the standings. But I think Seattle still has enough in the tank to push forward and at least get one of those playoff spots. And winning these kind of games, these are the kind of games they need to take care of business if they want to get back into the postseason after missing it last year.
Well, this is one that'll kind of stand out for you. The Rams are at the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are 14.5-point favorites at Arrowhead here. Wow, just to think about that. For the defending Super Bowl champion, not a great place to be in, but we know the injury situation for the Rams, and so this is a huge number. Clearly going to go with the Chiefs here, but even at 14.5, I wasn't comfortable picking the Rams to lose here by this much, but I can't say I didn't consider it at one point, Dylan, because I think just where the Rams are right now, you could see the Chiefs winning this one big.
Yeah, this goes, we said that with Miami against Houston, but I think especially in this one, the Rams have just been pretty bad, and the injuries have not helped things, obviously. 88.2% favorite for Kansas City. That is a huge number on ESPN's Football Power Index. Rams defense has not been as good lately as we've talked about. Their pass defense in particular is just soft. It is really bad. It's hard to watch. I know that it's a product of some of the, not having that kind of pass rusher. They obviously with Vaughn last year, but they still did things better. And over the, early in the year, they looked pretty solid there. And it just, now every time it's just so bounty soft defense of fronts that they're throwing up, and that is not going to work against the Chiefs. They will very much take the underneath stuff, and then they'll run by you after they take the ball from underneath. And so you have that mixed in with the Chiefs defense that I don't think is going to be challenged much here because, it's all the issues we've talked about the Rams. things even beyond the injuries, before the injuries started racking up that they had problems with. But now with Stafford back in the concussion protocol, obviously Kupp's out, the whole offensive line is injured, and every week there's a new injury. You're gone to your like fourth left tackle. It's a mess. Wasn't not too mad about how their offensive output, honestly, in New Orleans, given some of the shortcomings they've had and some of the things they're able to actually figure out. Maybe they have figured out a little bit in terms of what they need to do to at least not be just completely unwatchable when they have the ball. But man, this is a game that early in the year, before the season started, you looked at this on the schedule and were like, oh, it could be a fun one. And now it has the biggest spread of the week, and it deservedly so. Yeah, the Chiefs are the pick. I think just like Miami, I would pick them to cover if we were picking strictly on spreads. There's just nothing from what the Rams have done lately to think that they're going to stand a chance in this one.
Another game we probably expected to be lower on the point spread. So these honestly, Dylan, probably would have been our games of the week earlier in the season, very early in the season. Yep. But they're not now. The Packers are at the Eagles here in our final game. Eagles 7-point favorites in Philly. I'm picking the Eagles. I just think you have more confidence in them with what they've done at this point. Packers, you thought maybe we're getting back on the bandwagon, but I wonder if we kind of overreacted a little bit to that win against the Cowboys because they came out, did not play as well against the Titans. Now they got to go on the road to play an Eagles team that's still very good despite the one loss and the near close call they had against the Colts.
I knew I was going to regret that Packer-Titans pick last week as soon as I made it, but stuck with it. Didn't work out, obviously. I think Green Bay has a chance here. I think that's indicated by that spread not being so high because obviously Philly the last couple weeks, as you mentioned, have kind of come back down to earth a bit in terms of barely beating the Colts and losing to the Commanders. And I know some things could have went against them in that Commanders game, a lot of turnovers and fumble luck for Washington. But they are just a better team still, and they are at home again, and the Packers have a lot more pressure on them, obviously. Still pressure on Philly in that race in the division. Obviously, they have the win in hand over Dallas, but you want to take care of business if you're them. You want to end up getting that number 1 seed. So there's some pressure, but man, the Packers are in a spot where you fall to 4-8. At 4-7, we're getting desperate here, but you fall to 4-8, and it's looking real bleak even in the NFC. Their offense has looked still better, at times, but at the same time, you watch in that Titans game the pressure that they were able to, the Titans are able to get on Aaron. I wouldn't be surprised if Philly does the same thing in this one. It's going to be a lot of running the ball, trying to take advantage of something that Philly's defense hasn't been perfect against. I do think matchup-wise, there's a chance because of that. 26 in rush defense DVOA for Philadelphia. The Packers are the 5th best rush offense. So that'll be the story if they find a way to win this game. I think it'll be not Aaron Rodgers. It'll be their 2 headed back with Aaron Jones there and A.J. Dillon. That would be the one way that if they can find a way to win. But if they can't slow down Jalen Hurts, if Jalen Hurts and that offense get back on track, which I wouldn't be surprised with, given that, as I'm talking about the issues for Philly's defense, we're not exactly talking about a perfect Packers defense. They're 4th worst run defense DVOA. Also not going to match up for what Philadelphia can do on offense. I think we've always talked about that with the Eagles this year. They're able to, now that the passing game is really developed, that depending on their opponent, they're able to really attack the weaknesses. This could be back to one of those Philadelphia games from last year or late in the season as they started just running the ball constantly and demolishing go up front. I think the Eagles are the better team here. But a game I'm still, despite the Packers' record, still I'd put this one on pretty high up on my intrigue meter. I think Green Bay, there's still something there. Even if they're not going to make the playoffs this year, I still think they're an interesting team that can give trouble to some of the top teams in the NFC down the stretch here.
Yep. No, I think so. I think it will probably wind up being one of the better games. So we'll see how it plays out in that one. All right, there are picks for Week 12 in the NFL. And, of course, Dylan, get it all covered over Clutch Points. Let everybody know where they can find all that.
Yeah, you can go to the Clutch Points app to follow all these NFL games on Thanksgiving throughout the weekend. Tons of coverage, tons of betting coverage on the NFL. We have odds predictions, and we'll be on clutchpoints.com, the NFL section as well as the betting section. Tons of stuff with college football, a lot of big rivalry games coming up this weekend. Tons of stuff with MLB free agency we've been covering and reading the MLB section of the Clutch Points app, and obviously the NBA. So tons of good stuff, tons of NFL coverage, tons of news, tons of Odell watch is very much on board right now with the Cowboys and Giants. I know 2 of the teams that are pretty much in the mix here. It'll be interesting to see him go back to the Giants. But yeah, any of that, all updates, follow us on Clutch Points on the app and in the website.
Yep, be sure to check it all out there. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Any podcast app you use, search for Establish the Pass. Thanks as always for listening to the podcast, and we'll talk to you next time here on the Establish the Pass podcast.